we have very loyal, okay, listeners. And our fear is, look, we know we're facing challenges in terms of building the audience, expanding the audience, but that's sort of the secondary problem. The first problem, the one number I want to make sure I see, is that we're retaining the people we have. We're retaining the listeners that we have. We are continuing to satisfy that core group, because without that as our foundation, things would be very different.
Welcome to Stickology. On this show, we obsess over unbreakable bonds, that rare connection where customers don't just buy from you, they believe in you. But how do you maintain that bond when your product is free and your shareholders are your listeners and your employees are driven by a civic mission rather than a stock price? To answer that, I've brought in Tom Reno. Tom is the rare breed of leader who speaks two languages fluently, the language of Wall Street and the language of the newsroom. As the COO and the CFO for New York Public Radio, Tom manages the business engine behind all their media properties. Today, we'll discuss leading with empathy, the tension between mission and money, and how to build lasting loyalty. Tom, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Stephen. Thank you for the invite. Excited to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. There's lots of good stuff to dig in on. I'd love to start by just talking a little bit about your career arc. As I know from your early days, you were a financial reporter, and then you went to the global agencies. You run your own consultancy, and now you're in the C-suite of public media. I'm hoping you can give maybe a little more information about that arc and what brought you ultimately to New York Public Radio.
Yep. So yes, it's been anything but a linear career, quite honestly. It's almost like the movie Being There in a way. I started my career actually in investment banking. I was a junior equity analyst, and I covered financials. And after doing that for a few years, there were elements of that job I really enjoyed. Part of it was the research. I loved writing my reports. Number crunching is number crunching. I wouldn't say I loved it, but it was a part of the role. But long story short is, I had an opportunity to jump to journalism. I met someone who was a highly respected journalist, and he knew my background, and he was like, you have this really interesting background. You seem to really have a passion for communicating. And have you ever thought about being a business journalist? And I said, no, I never have, but I definitely do understand. This is the 80s, and there are a lot of new instruments out there, things like asset-backed securities that people quite didn't understand. Long story short, I jumped over to journalism, and I worked at what was called Dow Jones Teller 8 Newswire, Capital Markets Newswire. And, I loved it because it was so fast paced, and it was an opportunity to kind of get an inch deep and a mile wide on a lot of topics, and really get an understanding of how businesses run both well and poorly. And you start to get a sort of an understanding. There's a common thread between those that run well and those that don't. And at some point, my wife and I, we were thinking about having children, and journalism was under a lot of pressure. And so I said, maybe I'll go over and do corporate communications. And so my first job in communications was actually head of investor relations for a public healthcare company. And after a series of acquisitions, I jumped to my agency. And that's how I got into the agency world. So you could see a lot of this wasn't planned. It's just there are opportunities and doors, and you knock on them and you go in them, right? So I went to my agency, and that began about a 30-year run at agencies. First as a practitioner in corporate and financial communications. And then I think because I had this, formal, business and finance background, I ended up moving into agency management and spent a lot of that time as either the COO and CFO, or the COO. And as you said, at one point I had my own agency that focused on financial communications. For the past 7 years, I was actually at Precision Strategies, which is a highly regarded DC-based public affairs firm. They also do a lot of political communications. And we had a tremendous run. I mean, the agency grew close to 400% during that time. And We were able to take in private equity investment, which was great, continue to build. And about a year ago, I'm at that stage in my life where I'm like, I don't know what's next. If there's a next, do I want to kind of just consult? Do I want to, maybe just get on a couple of boards, maybe a nonprofit? And the nonprofit kept coming up over and over again. I just wanted to do something personally meaningful before my career ended. But I also knew I wanted it to be the right opportunity where, I could go into a nonprofit and one, needed to be in an industry that I have experience in. And two, I have a lot of experience in restructurings and working with companies that are going through some form of distress and how to turn them around. And anyhow, long story short, I got a call from a recruiter who introduced me to New York Public Radio. And public media, and in particular New York Public Radio, was going through a very challenging period. And they were looking to hire their first COO. They had a CFO, but they were looking for someone who was not only a CFO, but also had a background as being a COO, could work with the CEO on strategic planning and really, forging the future for New York Public Radio. And it wasn't a hard sell. I was, as a kid, I grew up listening to WNYC. My father was an avid listener. And I remember sitting in the car as a kid listening to the radio and listening to the station. And I don't know, it was full circle moment in my life. I said, this is what this like checks all the boxes, right? It is an industry, it's media. I've been in and out of the media my entire career. I've definitely dealt with turnarounds. And how could you not fall in love with what they do, the mission? So that's how I ended up in New York Public Radio.
As a longtime listener, and by the way, a one-time caller, I actually have a tremendous appreciation, and whether it's in my car or on my phone, regularly I'm listening. So I appreciate the work you're doing, and just as much I appreciate the work all your colleagues do. And boy, what a tough time to be in that business. What a tough time.
Yeah, it's been an interesting run. I joined in April, and then by the summer we were hit with the rescission, which was loss of some funding, and then the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is basically it's gone away, and so it's been a very difficult period. But I will say that we are coming out of it very strong. The one thing about New York Public Radio is we are not simply radio. We have other properties. We have a very healthy podcasting studio business. We also have the Gothamist. We have the Green Space, which is an event space. So we're a little more diversified. We're not solely radio. We're also, we're the largest public radio group in the country. And so I think that scale also helped us. And honestly, I give all the credit to my colleagues and my predecessor in that there was a restructuring underway when I got there. And I really kind of just took it to the end zone. And we were much better prepared. We knew this could potentially happen. So, knock on wood, we came through it well. And I also there's just been such a groundswell of support from, people who are angry about the loss of public radio. Sometimes people forget that there are areas in this country where public radio is their only source for news and information, so we're really an important conduit to, provide people critical information to get through their daily life. And so anyhow, it's been great. Donors have been tremendous. Membership has been tremendous. So, knock on wood, we're doing well. And I think we're getting really well positioned to be a leader in the public media space moving forward.
I'm not surprised to hear you say that. And I think that, the way you talked about earlier about the fact that in many parts of this country, that is their main source. It's such an important, mission and important cause to get behind. So I love when I saw that you went over there, I was so excited and just thrilled to see that. I'm curious, when you think about your journalism DNA that you have, and you contrast that with the business hat that you have to put on, does that help you build trust with the creatives in your organization?
I do. I think the same thing happened in the agency world, because in the agency world, I was a practitioner. I had clients, I led accounts, I dealt with all the pressures and all the challenges that you have when you're an account lead. I was also a journalist, and I understand what The pressures are there, and I will tell you, it's been a long time since I've been a journalist, but there are certain dynamics that are still in play. It's there is this giant machine that has to be fed all the time, right? And there's so much competition, and because of technology and social media platforms, anybody can be a journalist today. So uh, our job is to not only be able to keep pace with everyone else in terms of breaking news, but also to deliver a quality of journalism that's sadly missing right now. Um, and um, and so I get that, and I think that does provide some, let's say, a small margin of, there's always tension between the business side and the creative side, but I do think that having been in their shoes, they have there's a sort of comforting, okay, he kind of gets what we're doing. That's why I'm not kind of a classic CFO. I didn't sort of rise through the ranks simply as an accountant. And I think that's why when I have empathy and I think they can see it's genuine, I get the challenges, and I'm here to work with you. We're going to figure out how to overcome those challenges.
It's funny that you bring up technology because, and I don't think I'm making this story up, Tom, so please keep me honest here. But I recall when we worked together 20 years ago, you tell me about 20 years prior to that, when you had your first computer.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, it was the size of 4 phone books combined.
It was a desktop with a handle. Yeah. So what happened, I came out, and I'm not going to say when, but it was really just on the cusp of personal computers. And, half the organizations that I worked at, half the employees didn't have computers. Some were still with typewriters, some had computers. It was predominantly desktops. And I used to cover the Federal Reserve when I was a journalist, and they didn't have laptops. They had a portable computer, which a portable computer was basically a desktop with a handle. It weighed like 25 pounds. And I would run down to the Fed with this thing and get it all set up. And everybody thought wow, that's amazing. It's got the whiz kid. And then after I would cover the Fed meeting, and then I would go run over to the phone booth and attach this giant, and then I would go over and it sounded like classic early days of the screeching when you heard the transmission, and it was crazy, but it's amazing how far we've gone in my career. It's crazy.
No doubt. And that story made me smile 20 something years ago, and it made me smile again today. So, shifting gears, you talked a little bit about precision strategies. So that agency, if I'm not mistaken, was founded by some top Obama campaign aides. And when you think about campaigns, they are the ultimate exercise for building bonds quickly with donors. What are some of the lessons that you learned from that world that you're applying to public radio?
Well, it's interesting. That was the value proposition of Precision, which is the 3 founders had all worked together in the 2 Obama campaigns in different roles, and brought different expertise, be it communications, digital, campaign management. And but what they realized is the recipe or the playbook applied on campaigns. Okay, and if you think about it, a political campaign is like the ultimate branding campaign, right? And you're doing it with speed and urgency, and you're heavily relying on data. And so they when they were done and exhausted after the second Obama campaign, successful campaign, they said, "Hey, let's join forces and let's see if we can do this for corporations, for nonprofits, et cetera." And that's exactly what they did. And so, one of the things I got to witness is that campaign approach to branding or reputation management, and it was really a lot of fun to see. I mean, the reason the company was called Precision was literally because it started with data and analytics. When the company was founded as an integrated agency, they had a data analytics practice. It wasn't a bolt-on like a lot of other existing agencies. So it was one that was very much about research informing strategies, positioning and messaging, et cetera. And it was very much also about grassroots and really reaching people at that level. And so that's something I find, is, and let me also back up and say, because you asked this before, is the people at Precision, many of them worked on political campaigns, so they were very passionate individuals, right? And so one of the common denominators between that world and where I am now is passion. I mean, the people here are incredibly motivated. They want to make a difference. And that's what I found at Precision is the staff there very much wanted to have an impact. And so some of our clients were like March for Our Lives. And so we literally helped build March for Our Lives. And these, our employees were passionate about, gun control and making it, a difference. And I see that here. It's very much about, the mission of public radio and keeping it alive and producing quality content. And so I think successful organizations, if you like, you lift up the hood and you take the first thing that pops out of the engine is the people are incredibly passionate and motivated about what they're doing. It makes my job a lot easier because I don't have to motivate people. They're already motivated,
That makes sense. I want to focus on that passion in a second, but before we get to that, I want to also double back to something you just talked about, which was speed. And so certainly at Precision, the speed was really clear. Your experience as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you had to move fast. Now, I'm curious about the culture of New York Public Radio. Is it that fast, or is it a legacy organization that maybe is harder to get that speed done in? And if so, how do you balance that without breaking the culture?
I would say right now we're in a period of transition, understanding that the landscape has changed and we do have to move with a certain urgency. I think that if there was any silver lining in what we faced this summer and what we're continuing to face in terms of the funding challenges, is that we had to take a hard look at how we do things. And I do think that it's natural, New York Public Radio has been in existence for 100 years, right? And we have a lot of people who've been with us. God bless them for their loyalty for decades, and sometimes you just kind of get into the, patterns and it's hard to change those patterns. But I do think what's happened is everyone kind of sees the challenge and understands the challenge and recognizes that we have to do some things differently and we have to operate a bit like a for-profit, even though can't lose sight of the mission. But we also have to understand we have to be really good stewards of our funding. We have to operate with urgency. And it's really important we get back to being sort of a creative lead in public media, because if not us, who? And so there's that opportunity. And I think everyone's recognizing that we are certainly well positioned to lead the next iteration of public media. And it's going to be a digital transformation. It really is. Because if you look at public radio now, it's very much a terrestrial, it's radio signal. And, we were a little slow as an industry to digitize and move to a digital. We're doing it. And I think there's opportunities for us to lead. But to answer your question, it's a bit of a challenge. I think, as I said, I had a bit of a challenge also because I didn't come out of public media. I didn't come out of a nonprofit. So I'm sure there were some folks like questioning, well, what does this guy know? Why should I trust him? And so part of what we're doing now, part of what I'm doing is gaining everyone's trust and confidence. And it's been the small things, look, we've had to, cut expenses and do all the things we needed to do to be, more financially, stable. And with that, though, it's now allowing us to go back to investing in the organization and the company. And that's really important because we have to reinvest. I think the one challenge you face in nonprofits is that people don't understand that although you're a nonprofit, you have to make a profit, and just, because it's not a situation where you can spend your operating expenses can be 105% of your revenue because now you're at a loss, right? And the problem with losses is that, one, it creates lots of problems, but the biggest problem is you no longer have the capital to reinvest and build for the future. And then one day you wake up and the future's here and you're behind, So It's been interesting because I think now 7 months in, people are getting it. They're getting on board with, we need to, run smartly. We need to run efficiently. We need to take that savings and reinvest into the business so that we can, again, be a leader, not a follower.
Yeah, I imagine when you think about the fact that some of your colleagues have been there for 20, 30 plus years, that making that transition to thinking that way takes time.
It
Um,
does. It
uh,
does.
I'm curious, just from a cultural standpoint, do you feel like there's any difference in certainly how folks who have, and not specific individuals, but folks who've been with an organization for that long, different approach to managing people who've been there and kind of are part of the culture from almost the get go? I know it's 100 years,
Yep.
so no
Yeah.
one's
No,
been there
I
that
hear you.
long, but
Yep.
yeah,
It, I faced this in the agency world too, where, I had been at a couple stops where the agencies had some folks that were there for a very long time, very much set in their ways. And it was a challenge because in some ways they were roadblocks for some of the young talent behind them. And those agencies were also uh, in a difficult situation in terms of they weren't growing. They were either barely profitable, running at a loss. And so there was an urgency. We had to make some changes. And so one of the things I learned out of that is that you really need to spend time with those senior people or those tenured employees and, get to know them and understand what motivates them. And then how can I, effectively sell them on these changes and how that will directly impact them. You could never get away from the what's in it for me. And you have to answer the what's in it for me for employees, particularly those that have been at an organization a long time. Why should I change? And so you really have to spend time with them and get an understanding of who they are and what still motivates them. And then that you work that and you, again, it's about getting them to get an understanding of this is sort of where we are now. Call it a fact basis, but this is where we are today. And this is where we need to go. And we really need your help because you are, the cultural leads here. You've been here a long time. And so we need you to be on board. We need you to be advocates. And so, I find when you treat people that way with respect and you kind of lay out the challenge, more times than not, they change. They got on board with it, because they never lose sight of the mission and they are still passionate about the mission. It's just how we go about delivering. It's got to change and you got to answer the what's in it for me. So that's kind of been my playbook. It's, I think it's pretty successful.
yeah. Well, and it makes sense. Ultimately, they say that great leaders are the ones who are listening to their team and really accommodating based off of the individual, right? So, no, two employees need to be managed or can be successfully managed the same way, right? It's about them and making sure that you're empowering them to be the best them that they can be, right? So,
A huge believer in servant leadership. I started my career in investment banking, and that was anything but servant leadership. It was very much command and control. Go get my coffee. Yes. And the thing about a human capital business, be it an agency or here at New York Public Radio, it's herding cats. Everyone, your products are people, and your products can walk out the door, right? You don't have a ton of leverage on your products, so it's all about how you treat them. It's all about how can I help you be more effective in your role? It's more the art of persuasion and influence than it is, you do as I say. That doesn't work. So it's really, you got to come to common, ground. And as I said, I tend to ask more questions and try to figure out how I can help them. And if somebody thinks that my idea is their idea, I'm successful.
sure, sure.
But yeah. That's a valuable lesson I learned sometimes the hard way over my career.
One of the things I love. I recently spoke with Gary Ridge, the CEO now and chairman emeritus for WD-40, and they are very well known for their servant leadership. They're very much known for um, building coaches instead of managers, right? And to that very point, it's about as a leader or a coach, you're not there to take credit. You're there to make the best out of the people who are part of your team, right? And so I concur with everything you're saying, right? It's ultimately not about taking credit, even if it's your idea. Let them feel successful, let them grow, let them learn from that growth, right?
And also, you get a layering effect. It may have been my original idea, but they might come up with some nuance to that idea that I didn't think of, which is great, and that's part of why it's really important to New York Public Radio, and it was something that I shared, that value was diversity, because you get to the business of ideas, and the best ideas come from anywhere. And so it's really important to have diverse perspectives in an organization, because otherwise you're like, you're in an echo chamber, and you're just listening to yourself. So yeah.
To that end, Tom, one of the things I think is really interesting about your organization is, yes, you have those people who've been there for 30 years, which we just discussed, but you also have new hires from this digital world. And those two groups often speak very different languages. I'm curious, how do you build a single culture that serves both of them?
Commonality is everyone here believes in the mission. Okay. And that's why they come here. It's why they stay, and it's why they come. What impacts their time here is leadership. And so I will say that there is a appreciation of new ideas. I think most people are open to hearing new ideas, even those who've been here doing the same thing for a long time. And this is a somewhat flat organization, which I'm happy that I inherited. It's not a lot of hierarchy, and so everyone feels comfortable having a seat at the table and offering ideas. And if they don't, then it's something that I will make sure happens, because that's really a critical value for me, is that people feel welcome and it's inclusive. They have the ability to speak their mind and share ideas. We had a staff meeting yesterday, and we open the door to, at the end of every staff meeting, we have a good 20 minutes or more of Q&A. Okay. And let's be honest, investigative journalists have a habit of asking difficult questions, and you can't run from it, and so that's a big part of it, is be transparent, operate, and be open about things, and encourage new ideas. And so the one challenge you face, and I think we're unique right now in terms of how many generations are in the workforce at once, right? We've got boomers, we've got Gen X, we got millennials, Gen Z. It's crazy. And they all have like nuances to, the way they work, and how they, value their job and what they expect out of their employer. And there's like, nuances by generation. I will say the one thing I think is common across every generation: people just want to be heard. They want to be able to, one, they want feedback, and two, they want to be heard, and three, they want to be appreciated. It's not that difficult, so as long as we can provide, platforms so they can be heard and they can be appreciated, it's, I think that's where the success comes from.
Here to that. Tom, in addition to certainly some of the diversity in age, generations, if I'm not mistaken, New York Public Radio also has made a massive commitment to diversity, overall, embracing all voices, kind of like you said. I'm curious, how do you operationalize that? Is it just about hiring different people? Is it about going deeper into daily operations? Can you talk a little more about that?
It has to be a more holistic approach than just simply hiring. Hiring is certainly a critical element to it, but beyond hiring, it's training. It is also, when I say training, there's two elements of training. There's training of managers so that they are better versed in how to create diverse teams. And then there's training in terms of how to develop diverse teams. I think where a lot of companies or organizations fall short is the hiring is, everybody focuses on diverse hiring, but then when you get the diverse candidates in, are you helping them succeed? Right? Are you recognizing what their strengths and weaknesses are, and are you making sure that they're, set up to succeed, or are you setting them up to fail? And I think it's a big part of whether or not you have a successful, diversity effort. A lot of the things we do, I can't take credit for it. I mean, they've done an amazing job here before I even arrived. And so for me, it's just keeping it going and keeping the enthusiasm and supporting it financially and all those sorts of things that I have to do when I'm wearing the CFO hat. But I've got a great HR department, and I don't even want to say HR because it's not an HR initiative. It's literally, it's a cornerstone here. And it has to be, because the one thing we can't forget is we look at ourselves as the news and information source for New Yorkers, right? We're it. And we are that companion of all New Yorkers throughout their day. And just think about how diverse New York is. So if we don't have a diverse workforce that reflects the diversity of New York, how can we be effective in that mission, right? So it's an imperative that we're diverse. Otherwise, we're not going to, capture the voices we need to capture. We're not going to provide the information and news and all the stuff that people rely on us for if we're not diverse.
Yeah, you need to reflect, and you need to represent the people that you're speaking to.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm curious, maybe let's talk a little bit about your end customer, your listener. New York Public Radio offers products that anyone can get for free. Yet people voluntarily donate millions to you every year. What's the secret to that relationship that other businesses can apply? And obviously there's a cause here, so there's a difference, but I'm curious if you can show some parallels.
It has to start with quality content. In our case, it has to start with, at the core of what we are was radio. And of course, we built out beyond that. But, let's start with radio. Is that the content has to be really good, because the mission helps. But if the content was terrible, we wouldn't have that commitment, because, what are you committing to? Free bad radio?
Right.
So, I think that, and I give so much credit to our newsroom and also, the folks who, produce our programming, podcasts and such, is like the quality of the content and the quality of the people, because some of our content, like Brian Laird, that's a person, right? And so they're the reasons that I think that people are so, it's like they really appreciate the quality of the content. Oh, and by the way, you're free and you're doing this and helping the communities. I want to support that. I can either spend X dollars for the New York Times, or I could spend no money for WNYC or the Gothamist, but I'm going to donate or be a member because I really appreciate the quality of their content, right? We believe we're sort of the last remaining standard bearer of quality journalism. And we really, it's been a critical value here that our journalism, the quality of our journalism, the independence of our journalism is what really separates us from, private sector media.
Yeah. Well, as a longtime listener, I would agree with you.
Thank you. So you're one of the many people that we rely on, because, you get it. You're smart. You're discriminating. You could go anywhere for your content, but you come to us. So we very much appreciate it.
I'll also tell you that proud moments in my house is when I say to my wife, "Oh, by the way, I donated today," and then she says, "Oh, so did I." And I said, "Well, we probably should have that conversation beforehand," but well,
we thank you. Thank you.
So I'm curious though, your demographic, I would imagine, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is aging to a certain degree. So how do you, and maybe it's certainly based off of quality, and I imagine some of it's based off of the diversity of your portfolio, but how do you build that same bond with the 25-year-olds in New York who don't even own a radio?
It's a challenge. And that's in part why we started to diversify as a business, well before I arrived there. I mean, the podcasting business started well over 10 years ago. It's true. If you look at, for example, WQXR, we are the classic music station in New York. I would argue we're the best in the country. But the truth is that classic music is aging. And so that's one of our, brands where we are working hard to extend that brand and modify the brand so that it's not only, it remains true to our core, consumers, but we're engaging new consumers. So, we've changed some of the programming. We're going to continue to alter some of the programming so that it's a little more appealing to younger audiences. It's not all classic music, even though it's classic music is at our core. WNYC, same thing. I think we are, again, it's new programming. Programming that has I think a younger appeal, a more diverse appeal. And even on the, we see the Gothamist in particular as the one vehicle that really can help us bridge to younger audiences. And the data that we have, our audience data, shows that it is in fact it definitely more younger audiences there than we have in some of our brands. So, and so that's an opportunity to take advantage of that and continue to build it. So we're looking at a variety of different ways, whether it's offering, different language versions of Gothamist, whether it's picking up some new beats that would be a little bit more interesting. So I don't want to give away a lot of secrets, but we're very aware of the fact that there's a good chunk of our audience that's, up there in age. And the key is, let's not make the same mistake that some other unnamed brands have, which is how do you keep your core customers, your core, consumers and bridge to new ones without insulting, there's been a lot of brands over the last few years that they recognize for a variety of reasons that their brand, their customers or their consumers were that whatever demographic it was might have been, contracting. And so they recognized they needed to do things to expand the audience, right? Diversify. But most have made the mistake of you don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. You have to cherish those core consumers and continue to give them what they want while also beginning to introduce, new content that can bring new audiences. And that's the greatest challenge, is to do both. And, we've got a lot of things in the works right now to do that.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky, but both demographics, or certainly multiple demographics, are important for growth.
It is. And you got to be candid about it,
Yeah. Tom, I'm curious, maybe we could do some future predicting, right?
Okay.
So let's look out 5 years from now. You can't have a conversation without AI coming up. And so I'm curious, AI will likely be able to read the news. They'll be able to curate music perfectly. Do you think human connection will become a premium luxury, or that people pay extra for, or how do you see AI playing into, to the scenario of your business?
I think it depends on which part of our business. I think if we look at the news side of our business, I think that people are going to still want humans writing stories. Okay, because as amazing as AI in terms of the outputs of AI have become, look, you get on YouTube and you can't tell the difference between an AI produced video or an actual video or audio. It's even more challenging with audio. But the process of someone going out and being live at a debate, or someone covering breaking news, that's not something AI can do, right? It still requires people to go out and write stories and do all the things necessary so that that's quality journalism, that's quality content. And the way AI can help is how we take that content and then slice it and dice it and put it out through our various channels so more people can have access to it. And AI certainly is going to help us from, like any business, there are things we do, internal processes, that I think we can use AI to improve, speed, efficiency, cost, and it'll free up, frankly, some of our people to do other things with their time that they're currently, again, I see one of the benefits of AI, one of the big benefits of AI is like, you know, every organization, there are tasks you do that are just kind of menial, labor intensive. They're not great use of people, of personnel. If we're able to do that, and that you find that in research, you find that in a lot of different, if we're looking at applications initially from a internal productivity standpoint, and we actually are working with AWS now to explore how we can use AI internally for some of the things we do, be it our research of our archives. Our archives are unbelievable. I mean, we have arguably some of the best archived news and information regarding New York City than anyone. I mean, it's just amazing what we have, but it's there. And how do we get it? And how do we access it? And how do we access it and scrub it so that we know what we're putting back out for people to see is accurate, right? And then we're not, there's not any copyright issues or whatever. So at some point, we know our future will be some AI-driven tools that will help people access us and access information in ways they can't now. But that's a more tangled process, and we're going to do that really carefully and smartly. But internally, we are already underway with a lot of very cool AI tools that will help us just go do our daily stuff better and more efficiently and free up, people to do much higher value tasks. Because look, one of the things that we face is we're not like a public company and then go out and just do another round of capital raising, right? I can't like, we're not going to be issuing bonds anytime soon. We're not going to do another, secondary for shares. So when we do get, funding from members or from donors or philanthropy or what have you, we've got to be really good stewards of that money. And if there are things that I can do with AI that free up people to do, as I said, more valued tasks, that's where I see the real benefit of AI. So 5 years from now, where do I see AI? I see AI allowing us to take all of the information that currently exists at New York Public Radio and make it available to people so it can enrich their daily lives. So if some student is writing a story about, New York City during World War II and what was it like, they can come to, New York Public Radio and search our archives and get some of the most amazing, news stories and that type of thing. And so I think that's how we can continue to build that relationship with consumers, is by continuing to grow the value, right? What we can provide for them. And AI will be a big part of that. AI will allow us to do things, whether it's offering multiple languages for our products, et cetera. So that's where I see AI helping on the outside facing in, and then inside facing is just doing what we do. I think faster, better, and less costly.
I love that. What a great use of AI as an enabler. And I love the thought of how do you use the richness of your archives. There's so much there. That's phenomenal.
You walk around our offices. I have in my office a radio from the 1920s. And it's a reminder that, again, we've been at the heart of New York for 100 years. It's really amazing. And you just see all these pictures of, mayors from, but most people don't even know who LaGuardia is. They just think of it as an airport, right? Well, he was a mayor.
Yep. Yep.
And we have photos with him in front of our microphone. It's just amazing.
And if I'm not mistaken, he had quite a unique voice too, right?
He did. Yeah. He was quite a character. Many of our mayors have been characters, but he was really a great man. And it's, as they say, you walk around our offices and you see those photos, you see the old mics, the old radios and everything. It's that connection to New York and New York's past that's really important.
Tom, I have two more questions for you. Okay. So if you could look at any number, one number on a dashboard, to give you insight about the health of your bond with your listeners, and it can't be revenue. What would you look at?
Retention.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Our audience retention is through the roof. And when I say retention, it's, we do a lot of research with, be it members or donors or what have you, and listeners. And we have very loyal, listeners. And our fear is, look, we know we're facing challenges in terms of building the audience, expanding the audience, but that's sort of the secondary problem. The first problem, the one number I want to make sure I see, is that we're retaining the people we have. We're retaining the listeners that we have. We are continuing to satisfy that core group, because without that as our foundation, things would be very different. And we did commissioned some research recently looking at just that and comparing, say, our listener loyalty. And I say loyalty as people who come back every day, and our WNYC or QXR or whatever is just a part of their day, and how many hours do they listen? And we're like very few news outlets can match us in terms of that loyalty. So that's something we can never lose sight of.
Well, I believe it, and I'm sure that probably goes right back to quality, right?
Yeah, it does. They go hand in hand. We just got to continue to produce quality content, and and listen to people. I need to give a lot of credit to the teams internally. We have an audience team, and they spend a lot of time listening, going through all the data, having those conversations. And it's important we keep listening to, not only our listeners, but our members and our donors. What is it about New York Public Radio broadly? And then when you get down into the, WNYC or WQXR, Gothamist, what do you love about it? And where do you think we can change? Where could we improve? I've always, and this, by the way, is applied to any business I've been a part of. You really can't sit on your laurels. It's like you're only as good as yesterday. It's one of the things I learned, early in my career. One is everybody's replaceable, and two, you're only as good as yesterday. So make sure you're paying attention and listening to your customers, because they will tell you, and listen and then act. So.
Final question for you, Tom. You kind of alluded to earlier what a tough year this has been, given some of the chips that have been served to you. And I'm curious, when the chips are down, when you go through tough times like this, what do you think a leader needs to do to ensure that the team emerges stronger on the other side?
People need to hear you have a plan. Okay. They need to understand that you've taken a really hard look at the situation, that you have a really firm understanding of the problem, and you have a good plan in place. And even financial plans are plans, and they need to be communicated, and you need to get everybody on board. And so one of the first staff meetings that I participated in is I shared with everyone my financial plan and financial philosophy. And, one of the things I said is that I spent a lot of time going through the organization very carefully, looking at pretty much everything that we spend money on, and trying to get an understanding of high value, low value. What are the things that are not critical that we either can eliminate, put on hold, whatever, because we need to be, we need to put forth a budget that has us at a minimum break even, preferably in the black. So, small profit, and start the process of building up capital that we can use for not only our future, but also to reward our employees. Because when you're going through this, any organization that's going through financial stress, right? The employees are often the people that feel the pain the most, right? And we went through a stretch where, whether it was we had a restructuring and there were some layoffs, and then, salaries were frozen and all those things that you do to survive. But at some point employees want to hear, okay, well, when do we get out of this mode and we're back to like growing again and feeling good and feeling confident and not worrying about, our jobs. And so it was really important for me to share with them that I am going to spend a lot of time trying to cut some of the stuff out that's not critical so that we have the excess capital so that we can withstand these fluctuations. The challenge is if you don't have a certain built-in profit for a nonprofit, not only can't you, invest in the organization, but you also can't withstand those fluctuations in revenue. And the reality is we can never forget that we rely on we rely on them becoming members or making donations. We rely on the generosity of others. So we better put a good product out, but more importantly, we got to be really good stewards of money. And we need to make sure that we are in a situation where, okay, if we have a sudden loss in funding like we had this summer, we can withstand it. And we did. And I think that was really a big step in earning everyone's confidence. We put ourselves in a position that, yes, we had a sudden change in our funding, but it was okay because we had made tough decisions and we made, difficult choices and put ourselves in a better situation. And we were able to withstand that. And that's kind of have to be the model moving forward is, run lean, run smart. Okay, let's never lose focus on the things that are really important and be good stewards of our funding. And if we do that, we will have just enough margin or profit that we can then not only reinvest, but, do the things we need to do as an employer, which is take care of our people.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, the people are the biggest engine of any business, right?
They are. And one thing this is not just to your public radio. I learned this through many restructurings, is that people need to see you have a plan, there's hope, and you're answering as I said earlier, the what's in it for me. People just want to know that they're going to have a job tomorrow, that at some point they're going to be paid, well for the work they do. Again, I sometimes think we confuse things as leaders. It's a simple equation, right? Pay people what they deserve, what the value they're driving, treat them with the respect, and also just operate transparently. And you'd be shocked at how that goes a long way.
Well, look, I think it comes down to, running any company successfully, you need a really strong purpose, you need a really strong strategy, and you need really great people. And you can't out-strategy a lack of purpose, and you have the purpose, and you have a good strategy, and you can't execute the strategy without great people.
No, you're absolutely right, because strategy without the people and without them on board, it's like any change initiative. If you don't have the people on board, they're going to fail, right? Any change, it doesn't matter. Any change initiative will fail if the people don't support it. And no strategy will be successful without the support of the people, because the people are going to execute. They're going to deliver the strategy. And so it's like, you got to have both sides of that equation. Yeah, you got to do your homework so that you have an informed, smart strategy, but then you got to communicate that strategy so everybody gets it, understands it, sees value in it, they see their role in it, and they want to participate in it. If you don't do that, it fails.
Hear, hear. Tom, this has been a lot of fun, and always educational for me every time I get to talk to you. So
same here, Stephen. It's a blast. I hard to believe that I remember you were that young guy out of college, and I'm like, the people may know here that I knew your older brother. He was a classmate of mine, and I couldn't believe, that he's your older brother. I said, well, now I get it. He was a really smart guy, and I could see why. So, you're really smart, and we're blessed to have you. So it was great. A lot of fun.
Well, you're giving me a big head, and I appreciate it. But thanks you for educating me again. Thank you for making me smile, and thanks for your time, Tom. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. It was a lot of fun.